football. I'm Kevin Clark. I'm going to have a meltdown if the NFL bans the Tush Push. Brad Spielberger from PFF joins me in a minute, make this quick up the top, to go through how the best and worst teams were built in 2023. And then Joe Buscaglia from The Athletic joins me to do a little bit of a Bills-Dolphins preview, which I think is one of the games of the year in the NFL so far. And like, just from a lot of times, like, oh, these teams are 3-0 or 4-0, or, oh, both these teams are undefeated late in the season, like that kind of game of the year in September, October. And those are great. I really enjoy them. But this is where we get to learn a lot about, let's say, obviously the Dolphins offense, how the Bills are built to potentially stop it or not stop it. Josh Allen in another big spot. Like, there's a lot to learn from that game. I wish it wasn't at 1 p.m. on a Sunday. But very quickly before we get to Brad and Joe, I can't believe the discourse around the Tush Push, or somebody said they're trying to make it the brotherly shove. That's not going to happen. Horses out of the barn. Okay. But maybe it's because they play a primetime game and we just react to it. That's just how it works. That's just how media works. Everybody watched the game. Nobody sits around a multi-view watching different things. So we're all reacting to the one thing we saw on Monday. So here are the stats. Tush Push is 37 of 41 per the Associated Press. The play was legalized in 2005 when there used to be a rule against pushing an offensive player, a lineman or whomever, anybody else in the field. They weren't allowed to push a player. Now they are. And somehow this has become a crisis. Pretty much every show has done a segment on this. And I'm shocked at the amount of people who say it's got to go. Shocked. First of all, 37 for 41 is not automatic. Okay. Second of all, even if it was automatic, this is something Nick Sirianni said many times, it's only automatic at this moment in time for the Philadelphia Eagles. If it was automatic for the Zach Wilson Jets, well, guess what? That would be great because they'd be able to generate some offense, but it is clearly not. In fact, Zach Wilson tried a quarterback sneak last week and got swallowed. Okay? That's just how this works. And I don't think that Jalen Hurts, who allegedly squats 600 pounds, and Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson and Landon Dickerson, I don't think there's going to be a play in short yards that they're bad at. So we're going to start changing rules because of that, because the team with the Hall of Fame center, a strong as hell quarterback, and a line that's built for this, built to get that yard, we're going to change the rules because they get that yard. I just think it's ridiculous. I don't think we should go around, even if it... I don't even, like, Mina joked about banning pre-snap motion like baseball with the shift. Like, if it changes the sport tangibly to where in 5 years it's unwatchable, sure, we can talk about whether or not throwing a guy forward is bad for the game. But again, it hasn't proliferated because it can't. Because my guess is people are saying, oh, why don't the teams just run the Tush Push? It's so automatic from short yardage. Yeah, well, NFL coaches, contrary to what you might think, are generally smart guys, and they've thought about it. I promise you, they've thought about it. And maybe they've tried it in practice, and they go, oh, I get it. We don't have a Hall of Fame center. We don't have an interior line built to get this kind of push. By the way, we call it the Tush Push. Like, the initial push comes from the line. Then there's a second push. It's Tush Pushes. Tushes Pushes is what we're dealing with right now. And so I'm struggling to see why you would ban it. Because if it was easy, everybody would do it. That's just how it works in football. Don't ban it. By the way, next year, if Jason Kelce hangs it up, this play might not work. So you're gonna have a competition committee meeting on something that might not work the moment one guy retires. If they don't go out and get another Hall of Fame center, you're putting your quarterback, and I've seen people say this, you're putting your quarterback in danger with that play. There's a risk reward for it. And I'm not talking about from a health and safety thing. I'm just saying, like, anytime, like, Tom Brady was automatic at quarterback stinks. He stopped doing it as a career went on because he didn't want to get hit. Jalen Hurts is fine with it. Jalen Hurts is fine being at this point in his career at the bottom of a pile. And so if he wants to do it, more power to him. God bless him. God bless the Eagles. God bless the Tush Push. Keep it legal. Don't legalize it. Keep it legal. All right, here's Brad. Tickets to the game, merch, meals at iconic restaurants, stays at Caesar's Palace. All this can be yours when you bet with Caesars Sportsbook. Win or lose, every bet earns reward credits, which you can redeem across the empire. Now, if you haven't started yet, use the code OMAHAFULL and then Place your first bet up to $1,250. If you win, great, you keep those winnings. But if you lose, you get your stake back as a bonus bet. Brad Spielberger series, the salary cap analyst for Pro Football Focus. He's a Bears fan. Are you okay, brother?
I'm doing all right. I'm surviving.
What do you think? Like, let's just game this out. I know I didn't ask you to prep for this, but like the future of the Bears franchise, if there's no miraculous turnaround here or some sort of 5-game win streak, something like that, like the 2024 Bears look like what, Brad?
I think we're looking at a young quarterback from USC, maybe a young quarterback from UNC. Yeah, I think we're getting into that conversation. And look, they have Carolina's first round pick as well. So maybe they're picking 1-2. Oh, Marvin Harrison in Chicago. I'm trying to stay optimistic. Like you said, am I okay? I said I'm surviving for a reason.
Is there a structural problem in Chicago? Like we got the question on Sunday night from a listener where they were like, if you're Caleb Williams, aren't you just like, no, I'm not going to Chicago to keep failing quarterbacks? Like, is there something? I have some theories because I think that if any problem lingers past two GMs or two coaches, it's normally ownership in some capacity, whether that's actual ownership or the people with ownership has decided they're going to run the team in their place or as proxies or whatever. Like it seems to me, Brad, there's a little bit of a structural problem just with how they build their team and how they operate.
Yeah, I'll answer this as delicately as possible. I think it's a fair question. It's a fair point. I do have a ton of faith, not just because I happen to cross paths with him, but I love the hiring of Kevin Warren as the president of the Chicago Bears.
Yes.
You know, obviously there's infamously they've had non-football presidents running the show. Yes, ownership is of course involved with every building, but so I do have a lot of faith that as he sees through, the new stadium, all those things, but also if they do move on, which I don't think they need to move on just yet, but if they do move on, I trust that process there, not hiring an external third-party, search committee or getting Bill Polian's thoughts and opinions. With all due respect, with all due respect, so I do have faith in that.
All right, we're doing something called How to Build a Good Team. I wanted to get the Bears talk out because once we started the segment called How to Build a Good Team, we couldn't talk about the Bears, obviously, because there's a couple of team building lessons I think we can draw here. I'm fascinated by that. Maybe it's just the former, baseball fan in me, just enjoying how a team is built, how a team spend their money, the resources, the draft capital. I just think it's weirdly underplayed in the NFL, just how teams go out and attack certain position groups or don't, or I mean, like Philadelphia, great example. The amount of guys they get on prove-it contracts at certain positions, why they do that, how traits-based it is, the flyers they take on guys they liked in the draft. Like that, to me, is one of the reasons they're really successful. And then you figure it out. And if you want to sign a guy to a 4-year deal after he proves it, or you just let Hargrave leave because he gets too expensive, like that, to me, a rotating door of talent is a really underutilized trick in football. And so I just think there's a bunch of teams like that that do smart stuff like that. I'm going to start here, Brad. You can take this anywhere you want. What team building job has impressed you the most right now?
Yeah, so you just mentioned one. I mean, you have to shout out the Philadelphia Eagles because they do exactly what you just said. I mean, first and foremost for me, they start in the trenches. Everything builds out from there. I know there's a lot of flashy stuff now about, coverage versus pass rush and all these various different things. I think the highest floor approach and the most repeatable, consistent approach is you draft and develop and you win up front and then you add corners and receivers and whatever. So that is the biggest thing. But also, I mean, they're always thinking 10 steps ahead, right? Like they trade with the New Orleans Saints. The Saints now have Trevor Penning, who's one of our lowest graded tackles, and they have Jalen Carter, who's our highest graded interior defender in the entire NFL. So there's that as well. They have to be mentioned on the list, but also as scary as this should be for fans, the Kansas City Chiefs are on this list, and it's not just because they have Patrick Mahomes. They are 18th in cash spending. They have the youngest defense on average age in the entire NFL. And that's a lot of good players in that defense. Trent McDuffie looks like a stud. George Karlaftis is now top 10 for us in pressures. So I think them too, the same thing. They draft, they develop. When guys get too expensive, they're okay moving on, like a Tyreek Hill, getting that draft capital. It can hurt in the short term. For them, it obviously did not hurt at all. But I think that is how you sustain success in the NFL.
Real quick, I know the cap is endlessly complicated, and maybe when we see the Chris Jones situation, maybe we won't be asking this question, but like with all of their high end guys, how do they make it work financially?
Yeah, so I think with the way they do it is first the way they structure their contracts to always give them cap flexibility. That they utilize these big roster bonuses in the early parts of
Mm-hmm.
years. If they want to prorate it, meaning push those cap hits out into the future, they do it all the time. They do it with Mahomes and Joe Tooney and Kelsey and Chris Jones, et cetera, et cetera. So they're always kind of again balancing the budget for the short term and the long term. But also, I'm not calling them cheap, but they don't spend to the top of the NFL. They don't chase a
Right.
window. They try to consistently be right in the middle. Like I said, they're 18th this year. So I think that's part of it as well. Is look, you can spend a lot. The Eagles are always spending a ton. But again, I
Yeah.
think the way they recognize like I know we fall in love with windows, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Like sometimes you should do that, but again, the sustained winners say, I want to win 10 games a year and then hope that health luck goes my way and a couple bounces go my way and maybe I win a title. I don't want to pour every single thing into one season. If you're the Rams, it works, but also then, you're the
Yeah.
Rams in 2023.
Hey, real quick, when can the Rams be good again? Seriously, like, do they have? Does what they did over the past 3 years, like, does that take them out for 2 years? Are they going to be okay next year? Are they taking their medicine this year?
I think the lesson there is if you have a coach that is a true difference maker in the Sean McVay realm, then you can get back pretty quickly. So, but I will still
Right.
say 2025 because for me, like Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Aaron Donald, like I don't think they can be the foundation of a contender going forward. Oh, they're still all great players, but like, are they going to be the nucleus of a championship football team in 2024, 2025? Like, Donald will be 34 years old, I think, at that point. So I don't know about that.
The Dolphins. It's such a weird journey because you had the Flores tanking years, we can call it that. Even though Flores won too many games for that to be considered a Sashi Brown style tank. But Chris Greer's been there the whole time. They get the quarterback; he's still cheap, and maybe we can talk about a Tua contract after this particular topic. You trade for Tyreek Hill, you trade down and then trade up for Jalen Waddle. When you look at how this team and we traded for Jalen Ramsey, he's not even on the field right now, and will be a difference maker in the second half of the season if he gets back. When you look at the way this team was built, what stands out, and are there any lessons other than if you just keep going eventually and you hire a coach who can put it all together, eventually things will work out?
This is the coolest thing I think about how we talk about how there's different ways to do it. So, first of all, the Finns
Yeah.
are 27th in the ratio of homegrown players to external additions. All the guys you just mentioned, that's just saying comparing, their draft picks and UDFAs versus guys they traded for or signed in free agency. They're 27th, meaning they're mostly compared to the league outside the team. You even mentioned Bradley Chubb. They trade a first round pick for him as well. So that's the one lesson. And the second is they kind of flipped the script and they built from the outside in, right? You have Xavier Howard. Obviously, Ramsey hasn't played.
Mm-hmm.
You get the two incredible wide receivers. Obviously, need a quarterback. Obviously, need a Mike McDaniel level coach. But their offensive line is playing well, and they did pay for Teron Armstead. But they've tried to draft there. It hasn't gone particularly well. And the defensive line has
I've
talent, no
noticed.
question about it. But I think that's the fascinating thing is they're not homegrown and they didn't focus inside out, and yet they're the most exciting team in the NFL so far.
What would you do if you were Chris Greer about Tua's contract?
It's going to be one of the most fascinating decisions in a very, very long time. Like, as much as I love Mike McDaniel, I mean, Sean McDermott, don't take it from me. He called the offense revolutionary ahead of the matchup this week. But I think it's unfair to say that a lot of this isn't Tua Tagovailoa as well. I mean, he has the fastest average time to throw, the highest average at the target. We also chart things like people say, oh, well, his guys are so wide open. On throws where we only chart 1 or 0 wide receivers as open, he's still our highest graded quarterback in the NFL. Like, there's a lot of that. His anticipatory throws, like knowing where he's going with the football before the snap even happens, I think that mitigates the lack of arm strength. Where look, you can throw
Mm-hmm.
downfield if you're throwing it in 1.5 seconds. Obviously, the late shot clock stuff, the interception against the Patriots, like that's not his game. That's Josh Allen, that's other guys. But he's so accurate and he's so smart that I think to answer the question, I think you do have to explore an extension. They have the 5th-year option at their disposal, but is he going to top the market? No, but I know this sounds crazy. Maybe he gets $50 million a year when Trevor Lawrence probably gets 60 this offseason. So he's still in the conversation, but he's not among the top 5 deals at the position.
So here's my thinking on this. And we're going to get all of these Galaxy Brain takes. I promise you, Brad, in the next month, someone's going to come out and say, Dolphins have to trade Tua, top of the market. They can replicate it, whatever. Like happens all the time. Remember that was the thing with Jared Goff. And by the way, I mean the Goff thing worked out, even though they probably shouldn't have given him all that money in LA because a lot of it was Sean McVay. Having said that, right now it's Ben Johnson. Maybe Goff is just pretty good. Okay, but I think the easiest thing in the world to do is have Chris Greer sit down with Mike McDaniel, close the door, lock the door, get rid of all the recording devices, and say, Mike, how many guys can you do this with? How many guys? Because is the answer we could do it with the 17th highest paid quarterback in football and not have to give this guy $50 million? I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. I think it's going to be really hard. I think the amount of guys that Mike McDaniel could do it with is already the amount of guys who are getting 45, 50, 55, $60 million. Okay. Like that's why I would go towards paying him. And this and I've heard guys say this before in the league, and maybe you have too. Maybe it's a lack of imagination, but like the cap's going up, and at some point it's like, you know what? We don't want to pay to find out that this guy was, we don't want to nickel and dime $10 million, and then all of a sudden our entire franchise falters. And I remember a couple years ago when Thomas Dimitroff signed Matt Ryan to the first $30 million deal, which was 4 years ago, something like that. He was just like, I think they were haggling over like $1 or $2 million at the end. And Dimitroff was like, man, have you ever been in a building without a franchise quarterback, without an answer at quarterback? Like the secretaries are all like, the demeanor is different. Like everything is different. The wide receivers are worried about their targets, but then is going to worry about their money. Like everything is different. And an answer at quarterback is the most beautiful thing in the world for everybody. And it's funny because I think Steve Keim said this a couple weeks ago on one of the shows where he was like, I guess Nick Bosa had said you have to draft me, and Keim kind of liked that, but he was like, Keim was like, I got an extension for drafting Kyler Murray. I would have gotten fired for drafting Nick Bosa, and that's just the way it goes. Having an answer at quarterback, and that was probably a mistake, but having, as far as the extension goes, but like having an answer at quarterback is what every franchise wants, and I think that it'd be very hard unless Mike McDaniel literally says, which I don't think he's going to say. If he says I can do this with Colt McCoy, then that's a different discussion. He's not going to do that. I think he wants a guy like Tua in that spot, and they'll probably keep him.
I agree with you. Yeah, I know the galaxy brain takes, like, now you have Brock Purdy and everyone's going to say, well, he came from San Francisco. They're doing it with Mr. Irrelevant. He's a great offensive mind, just like Kyle Shanahan is. Like, all that may be true, but I agree with you. Like, taking that risk, especially when you have a very talented and very expensive roster now, like, you're just going to say, hey, Tyreek, we're going to drop in a rookie and hopefully it works out. Right. Like,
we're going to roll with Mike White.
Yeah. Like, good luck with that. Yeah. So I agree with you. And I do think I never like to, speculate about a player's position. But I think if I'm Tua Tagovailoa and his people, if Miami does come to them in good faith and says, look, the Flores situation was bad. We probably could have done a better job with but said, look, we hired a guy for you who loves you. We tried to build this entire team for you because we love you. Can you do us a solid? And point to Patrick Mahomes, point to whoever, and credit to Mahomes, who said, I took a raise because I need to take a raise to help other players behind me, which is true. But hey, like I said, we'll give you 50, not 60. Can you stomach that? And I think if I'm Tua Tagovailoa, I say, yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a discount and give you some outs maybe a little bit earlier in the deal. I mean, look, teams have insurance on these deals for injuries, stuff like that. Like, there's ways around it. I pay him. I'm with you.
So the Browns have a historic defense. If anybody's getting $60 million against the cap, it should be Myles Garrett for just literally just how much he is wrecking offenses right now and quarterbacks. I am confused by all of this because they can compete for a Super Bowl with average quarterback play, and over the first 3 weeks, on balance, like Watson played well against Tennessee, but has not played well this year. Has not played well at all in Cleveland his entire tenure there. Which is now 6, 7, 8 games, something like that. Not saying he can't get to average, but he hasn't for a couple of game stretch there. So how screwed are the Browns in as much that the $64 million cap hits start next year? And I made a joke about it after when he threw the ball backwards from that sack last week. And these Browns fans, and I didn't even know this brand of Browns guy existed. They're just like, oh, well, we'll just restructure. It's fine. The $64 million cap hits will never be a problem. It's going to be restructuring. And it's like, it makes me laugh. And I was talking about this the other day, but like, restructuring doesn't make the contract free. Like you can't just. This isn't like a zero interest rate thing where you just like can say, "Oh, we'll just kick, and we'll kick the can down the road. We'll keep extending." I'm like, you're gonna make him your Kirk Cousins, where he just keeps signing to three-year deals for massive amounts of money just to alleviate the cap hit a little bit. What are their options? And listen, I saw a thing the other day that like there were loopholes to get out of the contract. I doubt those are real. I think that was a NBC Sports PFT thing. I doubt that happens. It might be real legally speaking, but is a team really going to like get in a court battle with one of the players they signed when whatever? That's a separate thing. But what are the Browns' options and what is their flexibility over the next 3 years when they have to pay Watson what it looks like amounts to over $60 million in cap money on a $45 million guaranteed deal?
When you see the restructure comment, I think I understand why we have a lot of credit card debt in our nation, because it's the same thing, right? Like it's, yes, you can push it down the road. You can make that a future you problem or a future Browns problem, but it doesn't disappear. And there's a reason why we look at the amount of dead cap a team is carrying in a certain year. If you're in the top quartile, the odds you make the playoffs are like 10%, right? Like it's going to hit you eventually. Right now, the Bucks and the Rams are first and second, in dead cap money this season. Yeah. And, Baker Mayfield is playing for Tampa Bay for a reason. So it does catch up to you. The thing why his fully guaranteed matters so much is because we can contrast it to Russell Wilson. Like there is an out for Russell Wilson even after this offseason. Yes. Is it a terrible out? Is it still a really painful out? Yes, but it does exist. Where with Deshaun Watson, because every single dollar is fully guaranteed, the only out is someone trading for him. And the odds that someone trades for that contract and that person are probably close to zero, right? So he's the guy. And it's fascinating because, like you said, off to a great start. Their defense has allowed the lowest yards per play through 3 weeks in 100 years. They should be a contender, but if they fall apart, right? Like I think you fire the front office, you fire the coach because you can't get out of this deal, which is tough because I think Kevin Stefanski does a good job. I think Andrew Berry overall does a good job as well. Yeah, I don't have a fun answer. There is no out. He is on this team until this contract runs out. Yes, you can manipulate the cap, but at a certain point, it's going to hamper your ability to add talent. You're not trading for Zadarius Smiths. You're not signing all these guys. Right. Eventually, that stops being able to happen. To a degree.
Best non-rookie contract in the league right now.
I think one that is very relevant is probably Maxx Crosby with the Las Vegas Raiders. For me, it's a classic. I say it's relevant because we saw all the edge rushers this offseason, Brian Burns, Rashawn Gary, Montez Sweat, Josh Allen, and Jacksonville not get signed. I got a pretty good feeling that the teams in those buildings were saying, why would we pay you more than that guy? And it was a very hard argument for the agents to make that they should. It's classic. He got drafted in the 4th round, and he wanted to get an early deal done, as he should, get some financial protection. But now him making $23.5 million a year when Nick Bosa is making more than $10 million more per year than that. Look, he belongs, I think, in that conversation. I do think Bosa, Parsons, TJ Watt, Garrett, maybe a little bit better, but he's right there in the thick of those things. I think it's the best deal in sports for a team right now. Besides quarterbacks, that's a different conversation.
Wow. Not counting Watson. Worst non-rookie contracts. I guess I don't know why I'd have to say non-rookie. Like all rookie contracts are great. Worst contract in football right now.
Yeah, so we could go to Russ, but that's belabored. I'll go. Yeah, like we get it.
I love we just have to put the Russ and Watson in their own category of horrendous contract.
Yeah, they have their own separate category. Yeah, so I'll say a couple older ones like Emmanuel Ogbah in Miami. They signed him off a good season, had back-to-back 60 pressures in 2 seasons, but now he's making $16.5 million. I think he's their 4th edge rusher. He barely plays. Similar scenario, Hunter Renfrow capitalized the top of the market. It was perfect timing for him. We saw the wide receiver Boone. He gets about $15.5 million. He doesn't play. I mean, Jacoby Myers didn't play in week 2, and Hunter Renfrow still only had 1 target. So I think he gets traded at the deadline to somebody. Last one, a newer one, not to be mean or anything, but Mike McGlinchey getting top 5 right tackle money in Denver. I think he's top 5 for us in pressures allowed. He's a phenomenal run blocker. There's no question about that. I personally am not paying top 5 tackle money for a good run blocker. But anyway.
I got all these people mad at me. Like 2 people. I don't know why I said all these people. 2 people got mad at me when I said the Vikings should just auction off Kirk Cousins. Everybody said, well, they're going to get a 3rd round comp pick for him in 2025. So first of all, if you can get a 3rd round pick in 2024, that's more valuable to a rebuild if you're doing a soft rebuild. So that's good. I threw out 4th round pick, which was stupid of me. I shouldn't have done that. But I said 2nd or 3rd round pick or 4th round pick. It should just be a 2nd or 3rd round pick. Ryan Tannehill same sort of situation, although he's obviously not going to command the same amount of money in free agency if he left. So it's a different comp pick formula. But I guess my question is, baseball is so good, and they don't have a cap and all that, but baseball is so good at this guy's leaving, let's auction him off. And my feeling is, and I said this on Sunday night, is like there's two things to consider about this Kirk Cousins thing. Number one is that Kwesi should wait as long as possible so that there's more teams that might be interested. Maybe right now it would just be New York and maybe Atlanta, but like XYZ, Derek Carr, let's say Derek Carr doesn't get back from injury. Jameis Winston looks like a disaster. You know, the Saints are always up for spending money. I believe Jason Fitzgerald said $8 million is what a team would need in cap money. That keeps going down $500,000 every single week. I guess the big question is here: how close are we to big time trades at the deadline of big pieces like that? And why don't they happen? They have happened more over the past 4 or 5 years, but like, why haven't we gone full baseball yet?
So we are trending in that direction, like you said. Last year, in the 24-hour window before the deadline, there were 10 trades. It was double the previous high of the past decade. And of course, some of those were smaller players, but I mentioned Bradley Chubb. A couple other big names did get moved. We had the Von Miller move, which I think is a new cool mechanism.
Miller,
right? Like those type of moves where you really just get
Jalen Ramsey was
right. Just like a mercenary type move. The guy is not going to stay, so you recognize that. You want to get as much value as possible. There was certainly an old feeling of just not giving into player, I think, requests and feeling like you should just hold on as long as possible. I do think that sentiment is going away. Why we're not full-scale baseball, I think sometimes, as we obviously do, get lost in like winning football games and all those things. I'll tell you this. Kirk Cousins showing up every weekend in Minnesota and that team going 8-9 is going to sell a whole lot of tickets in Minnesota and sell a whole lot of jerseys and do a whole lot of things that we don't think about because all we care about is winning games, winning Super Bowls and all that. So I know it's not a fun answer. Fans don't care, but yeah, owners want to make money. Newsflash. So I think that's one huge part of it. I think Tannehill is a legit trade option. I don't know about Kirk because also they have Jaron Hall, Jordan Ta'amu in the building. You didn't pay Justin Jefferson, trying to convince him, hey, we're going to waste half of your, prime years, with a rookie. With Tannehill, they have Levis, they have Malik Willis. I think that one is actually very realistic if Tennessee loses a bunch more games.
I think that might happen. Educated guess, that might happen. Get you out of here on this. And I'm sorry, the Titans losing games, not Tannehill being traded. The Titans will definitely lose a bunch of games. I have no idea, no educated guess if they're going to trade Tannehill. All right. Is there a trend that really good teams are doing right now in team building and spending and how they're doing the contracts? Like we don't talk about enough, or that the big piece hasn't been written, like, hey, teams are doing blank at the top of the league.
Yeah, so we did talk about the dead money and all that in the credit card, but I do think there is a smart and responsible way to do it that a lot of smart teams are doing. Eagles have been doing it for a while now. Cleveland is now doing it, I think, because Andrew Berry goes there. The Niners are doing it this season. I'm not gonna say for the first time, but it does look. I mean, they lead the NFL in cap space right now, and what they're doing is, essentially, they're believing in inflation of a cap dollar. Essentially, a cap dollar in 2023 on a $225 million salary cap, they believe, is more valuable than a cap dollar in 2026, where they're pushing these contracts out on a $300 million salary cap, right? So when you restructure deals and create all this cap space, obviously, every time someone does that, I get tweeted, oh, what move is coming now? It's not happening most of the time. It's just what they're doing is you can carry over any unused cap space in a certain year. So what Philadelphia does by restructuring all these contracts, and Cleveland went crazy this year, is they then roll over that excess into 2024. Mm-hmm. Because it's worth more now than it is down the road. And I think, again, you can't go crazy, but a healthy approach in that manner, I think we're going to see more and more teams abide by that and be willing to buy into the idea of, the inflation of a cap dollar.
Someone with a team that does that said, I am fearful of the day that this comes out and other teams start to understand it, because it is such a huge competitive advantage. Now, maybe teams won't. It's hard, and I barely understand it, but like it's a hard thing to pull off, and so not every team is going to immediately be able to do the copycat version, but like it's something that they really think is a competitive advantage, the teams that do it now.
And the one thing, the constraint is still going to be, you have to have an owner that's willing to do it, that has the liquidity and has the desire. So that's always going to be a constraint. But yeah, I'm not surprised he said that. And they are right. I think more and more teams are kind of getting the idea and buying into that notion, as time goes on.
Yeah, that was the one thing I remember at a GM said to me. I think it was on the record, but I don't want to say his name. But he basically said to me like, an owner, it is far less common than you think for the owner to just be like, oh yeah, here you go, here's some money. Like a lot of times it's just not. It is not what you think, even in a cap situation. A lot of times the cash spending is not where it needs to be, and that's a huge competitive advantage that nobody talks about.
I think it's probably by design. I'm sure when I go on all these shows, like big show like
Yeah, I'd
yours, and
say.
talk about this, they probably hate it if anyone's listening. But yeah, it is. It's a massive advantage, and there are owners that are richer than others. That is the reality of the situation.
I don't even know if it's richer than others. I think it's more just like more. I mean, like I obviously having 8, 9, $10 billion matters in the context of are you gonna spend $15 million more in cash this year? But a lot of it's just. I mean, there's a lot of rich guys who don't want to spend a lot of cash on, especially on a team that's not um ready to compete. I think if there's a proof of concept and you say, "Hey, we can go out and get X, Y, Z," then and we can reach the Super Bowl like that, then maybe the teams are more eager. Like, but I was talking to a front office guy last year, and he was basically saying like the way his front office operates, like if they're not like an 8-win team, then they don't really care to spend a bunch of money to get there. Does that make sense? Like if they're not in it to win it, then their team is not going to put maximum effort into the roster. I guess you could say that. But 2 years later, if they get the quarterback, if they've got the defense ready, then their owner will say, okay, well, you can whip us into shape. But there's a huge gulf as far as that goes within the NFL.
I mean, the perfect example is the Cincinnati Bengals. They deserve credit. They have bent so many precedents this offseason, not just giving Burrow guarantees way out into the future. They usually only guarantee signing bonuses. Even Andy Dalton had a $17 million guarantee in his entire extension, and Joe Burrow's over $200 million. But also, Trey Hendrickson was the first player they've ever extended with 2 years left on his contract over the last 15 years, I think. Like, they realize they have a window, obviously not off to the hottest start. And so therefore they are doing things differently. And you're right. That is a lot of owners say, hey, if I think we're legit, then I'll do it. But I'm not going to turn 6 wins into 9 wins by spending $30 million extra dollars.
We're going to get you out of here on this. Is there a team? So a couple of years ago, I remember me talking with a bunch of cap guys, and I was like, is there a team that's like screwed in a couple of years? And actually, people did say the Bucks because of the way they spent with Tom Brady. The Bucks would take that deal 1,000 times out of 1,000. Is there a team right now where you're looking at it and just going, "Uh-oh, the Bills are going to come due in a couple of years for this team"?
That's an easy answer there. It's the Los Angeles Chargers. Yeah, it's a very easy answer there. And look, if you have Justin Herbert, you can probably
Ooh.
cover up a lot of blemishes. But and to be nice, he just got hurt. I'm not saying this because he got hurt. Feel bad for Mike Williams. But you just look at the contracts of Mike Williams, Khalil Mack, J.C. Jackson, even Keenan Allen, who is balling but is getting up there in age. Like those 4 guys alone have like $100+ million in dead cap next offseason if they wanted to move on. I imagine Khalil Mack probably not going to be there. Mike Williams, again, I don't even want to speculate, but like they have all these expensive old players that are all going to be coming off the books, but they've pushed money out so many times, like we talked about, and it's all going to bite them in the you know what in 2024.
I would love to be expensive and old. Brad Spielberger, salary cap analyst at PFF. Thank you so much, buddy.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Joe Buscaglia is here. He's on paternity leave for the next couple of weeks. I feel awful that I'm getting him while he's doing this. Probably. How much did you sleep last night, buddy?
Let's see. I got a good 3-hour chunk to start, and then I was up for a couple hours. Then I got another 3-hour chunk. So we're good.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's the most anybody's ever slept in the first couple of weeks.
We're good, man.
Dude, you're rolling, man. So we're doing a quick Bills Dolphins preview before, I mean, one of the games of the year so far. Just as far as figuring out where these teams are, a lot of questions. I think the Dolphins are the best team in football right now. The Bills, I mean, people were saying, the line, I was on Pablo Torre's show yesterday. He's like, well, the line is really close. Like, it doesn't reflect it. Well, the game's in Buffalo, and the Bills are really good. And sometimes I think the public tends to forget that. Vegas doesn't. We'll start here. Are the Bills better than last year?
I think that they are, just because they made a lot of little micro improvements along their roster that I think kind of went under the radar because they didn't have a ton of cap and, they didn't make the big Von Miller splash, but they did a really nice job in filling some areas that they were really weak last year. Like the interior offensive line, I thought was a major weakness last year. They did a nice job in signing Connor McGovern. They drafted O'Cyrus Torrence. And now that's going along with Mitch Morse, Deion Dawkins, and Spencer Brown. So they feel like they have something on the offensive line. And then, adding a piece like Leonard Floyd to the defensive line while Von Miller's out was a very sneaky move. And just their overall depth has gotten better. They've gotten healthier. This Bills team basically went through absolute hell last year with whether it be moved games, obviously what happened on Monday Night Football against the Bengals with Damar Hamlin, and snowstorms, trying to get to their cars to travel to a road game. It was a wild year for a lot of reasons, but now I think they're a little bit more talented. I think they realize that this could be their last crack at it with this current core of the team, because they've got a lot of guys who are expiring after 2023. And so, yeah, I do think this is a better team. The week one game didn't really show it, but week 2 and week 3, they kind of brought it back.
Who are some of the guys? Obviously, football extensions are so weird because we always say, oh, this guy's going to leave, and then he takes a below market deal, or they prioritize him. We didn't think it was happening. Are there guys where you're like, all right, this guy's probably playing elsewhere next year?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm trying to find a way for them to get DaQuan Jones back, their defensive tackle, who's just so important to the middle of their group. But he's up there in age. I don't know if they're going to have the cap space for him. So that's one of those guys you're like, okay, they would really like to get him back, but how? Micah Hyde is another one. I think they love him, but he is also nearing the end of his career. And how much longer do they really want to continue this Poyer-Hyde partnership? And when does it cross to the point to where it becomes more of a, I don't want to say novelty, but like more of an allusion to the past as to what is actually happening.
A brand.
Yes, a brand.
Yeah.
Upholding the brand. I'm all about commitment to the brand, but yeah, it's for me, that's one of those guys. And then the one that I think they could keep if they wanted to, but I'm really compelled to see if they'll do it, is Gabe Davis. Just because they've got a lot of money sunk into Steph Diggs, and you're not moving off that deal for at least the next 1 or 2 years. But they love him. They made him a captain this year, and I'm pretty sure they've been talking. So I could see them do one of those in-year extensions to keep him around. But if he continues to have good games, then they might get priced out here.
The question I was asked so much when I was on like radio shows in the offseason is what happens when Sean McDermott calls his own defense? And Leslie Frazier's not there anymore. He's on NFL Network doing a great job. Like, this is the McDermott ownership of the defense era. What does it look like? What are the differences, and where does it show up?
Well, I think the key difference is just an overwhelming reliance on that front, on the defensive line. That's their blitz percentage is the lowest in the league, and they were near the lowest last year, but this year I think they're around 11%, and I think the next closest is either 14 or 15%. So that has been their formula, and they've also almost had to do it out of self-preservation, because I do think they have some legitimate questions on the back end, the back seven. Matt Milano is not one of them, but everything outside of Matt Milano is kind of a question mark. Terrell Bernard, even though he was defensive player of the week, I kind of wonder what he is as a run defender at this point in his career. Christian Benford is first time locked in starter. Tre'Davious White, is he the same guy still? Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, who we just talked about.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of how they have to go about it. Taron Johnson is another strength for them, but 2 guys out of their back seven that doesn't have a question mark leads to a lot of question marks. So that's been the biggest key. Schematically, he does get a little bit more aggressive in terms of not just sending the baseline front four when it comes to the money passing downs. And there was a couple of times against the Commanders where he sent both Milano and Bernard and dropped a couple of his defensive linemen. So that has been kind of a characteristic of it. But I am very compelled to see what he does against Miami, because I think there's a couple of battling principles about what he could do against this current opponent, and based on what we saw last year.
So that was what I was going to get to here, because I don't think Miami's been at this level for 3 weeks, okay, not 3 years. And a lot of times, even if they don't admit it, a lot of times teams within their division build to stop a certain team. And a great example, or conference, a great example is our buddy Brandon Bean, who said they went pass rusher, I think it was 2 years ago in the draft, at the top, because they didn't have enough pass rush against Kansas City. Literally, he was thinking, let's beat Kansas City. Now, the problem is they haven't had the opportunity again since 13 seconds in order to do that. But in the playoffs, but they gear it towards it. And I'm curious, watching this Miami team, watching this Buffalo team, is this Buffalo team equipped to stop in any way? I mean, I guess you could say the Patriots were able to contain this Dolphins offense using Christian Gonzalez, using a couple of the different looks that they had. Is this Bills team unusually equipped or unequipped to stop this Dolphins attack?
I don't think that they have the overall team speed to deal with it in a one-to-one kind of atmosphere. But that's kind of like the chess game that I'm interested in here, because I went back and I looked at the blitz percentages from the last 2 regular season games against the Dolphins. The first time in week 3 when the Dolphins got them 21-19, where it was stupid hot, the Bills ran like 96 offensive plays. There were at one point they had an offensive lineman who was playing on a torn ACL. That all happened, but they only blitzed around 9% of the time, and they got lit up. But there was a key difference between that game and the second game, because in that game they were without Micah Hyde, who was already on season-ending IR with a neck injury. Jordan Poyer was out. They didn't have Tre'Davious White. They didn't have current starter Dane Jackson. So they were rolling with 2 rookies in Kyer Elam and Christian Benford. And Benford got hurt halfway through the game. So they had a practice squad guy named Jamarcus Ingram in the lineup. So that to me wasn't a true representation of what maybe they'll do against this high-speed attack. That week 15 game, they blitzed 42% of the time. They nearly quintupled their blitz rate from the first game to the second game when they had their healthy crew outside of Micah Hyde. And I kind of wonder because Raheem Mostert in that game had 100 yards before the first half was even done. I kind of wonder if they just say, all right, run. And we're most worried about the speed of Hill and Waddle, because Waddle should be back, you would think. And then blitz Tua Tagovailoa. And Tua in that first half went 8 of 16 for only 100 yards. At the end of the game, I think he was 17 of 30. So it wasn't a typical Tua sort of game where he's really in the flow. And they used Milano a bunch to get after it. They used Edmonds a bunch to get after it. So I kind of wonder if maybe we'll see Sean McDermott buck the trend of what he's done early in the season, where he doesn't blitz a ton and try to get after Tua to make him nervous, to try and get him to hang on the ball just a little bit longer than that, 1.5 to 2.5 seconds that he's been doing.
Matt Milano's from Orlando, and whenever somebody is from Orlando, I want to find out they're a Magic fan. And so I asked a couple years ago, I asked some of the Bills guys in the comment, I was like, hey man, do you know if Matt Milano is like a Magic fan? Is he wearing like a hat around? And somebody who knows the team well said, I don't think Matt Milano likes anything except ball. And I was like, that's a linebacker. That's a linebacker. Thank God that exists. No outside interest except ball.
Yeah.
No magic.
Matt Milano.
He's got no Franz Wagner thoughts.
Dude, I just watched the Orlando Magic 30 for 30. I'll have to get your thoughts offline.
Wait. Are you sitting around like I did and just watching random sports documentaries because you have nothing else to do?
This was actually before
napping?
This was before our son was born, like right before. And I watched the Shaq and Penny one. I'm like, because that was I was a Magic guy growing up, so I'm like, okay, I gotta get in on this. But yeah, Milano, I don't really know much about him, and he's been here since 2017.
That's the read. That's the read I've gotten. Yeah. I watch so many sports docs. I watch like every college hoop sports doc. Is also Ted was born in January, so by the time I could like get up for air, it was March, and so it's like I'm watching the tournament now. I'm watching like the NC State 30 for 30. I was all in.
Oh yeah.
All right. These two things might be connected, but there's so many Josh Allen takes after week 1, and I think Dominic Foxworth had the great car analogy. Like just do 25 sometimes, like we're good here. Let's just be on the road, keep it between the white lines, and get in the garage. Okay. So we'll start here before I get into what the hell happened week 1. Like when the Bills and Bean has said this to me, and he's probably said it to you, I'm sure. The one thing they get on him about is taking unnecessary hits, which by the way, it seems like he's actually getting a little bit better at, even though he wants it to be his trademark. That's just how he plays. But he still has some weird ass throws sometimes, and you're still just like, what are we doing here? Why did this easy throw get a little lost in translation here? I'm curious, are we just gonna have to accept that the Josh Allen weird throw was just in in his arsenal, and we're gonna have to take the lows with the highs sometimes?
Yeah, I think so. And that's not to say he won't eradicate it from
Of course.
game to game, but I think when he was at his best in terms of getting rid of that stuff out of his game was when Brian Dable was here, because Dable
Mhm.
really worked intently with him on mechanics and making sure he was on it each and every week. And now that he's an established guy, I just don't know that there's that level of, okay, we're going to tweak mechanics while you're a franchise quarterback, one of the star quarterbacks in the league. It's more so game planning than anything. And Dorsey trying to figure it out himself in his second season. So I think it is just going to be something you have to live with. Um, the one thing about Josh that I've noticed throughout the years is that when he really does something just absolutely horrible one week, he's really self-aware to change it instantly the next couple of weeks, and then it's almost like until the meter kind of gets full again, where he's like, oh, I haven't done this in a while, then bang, back to it, and then it just kind of resets. So that for me is like when he imploded against the Jets with just some asinine throws, and also taking ridiculous hits. Even against the Raiders, he tried to hurdle his old college teammate into the end zone, and the college teammate was like, okay, he's probably going to try to hurdle me. Finally, against the Commanders, because Sean McDermott was like, hey, get this under control, he slid on his first run, and he kind of looked around like, everybody see? You see what I did there? So yeah, I think it's just always going to be a thing with Josh. You can't get that full Wyoming Josh out of Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just going to be something that you just kind of, if you're a Bills fan, you kind of shield your eyes when he does it and hope he gets up after the play.
I'm good with it. Like, if we could do it, we would.
Yeah.
Like you and I would. That's my take on it. Like, come on, you don't leave. You take the Ferrari out for a drive. Okay, you don't leave it in the garage. So related to that, like, was week one just a weird fluke? Like, how does the team view it? In as much that, like, I'm of the opinion that week one gets faker and faker every single year as there's less play in the preseason, as teams focus more on sports science and peaking more in November and December. Like, you've heard a couple of the Patriots have been on TV the last couple of weeks, old Patriots, Julian Edelman just saying, like, September was just, we're in the lab in September. It's not like we know that we're able to win, and it comes down to, especially a team like the Bills, comes down to 2 weeks in January defining whether or not they win. They have a successful season or not. Is that just the way the Bills view it right now? That week one was just got away from them and it was weird, and we're moving on?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm with you about the week one thing. Like last year, the Bills went into week one Super Bowl favorites. They crushed the Super Bowl champs at their home barn. And then, they were good for the first 6 weeks. And then the season kind of unraveled on them. As much as a season can unravel if you go 13-3. The Bills this year, I think they just saw Josh try to get a little bit too out of pocket in that first game, where he was really trying to force it down. His eyes were not trying to. He wasn't really doing a great job of making the defenders guess elsewhere, and that's why they kind of pinned in on him. And one of the throws was like, okay, the first interception was sure de facto punt, toss it down the field, but the other ones were like, okay, there's a post corner route that he just stared down, and then the other one on a second down where they still had some life to live on that drive, he just chucks it up and that becomes a pick. And then he has the fumble where it kind of goes right through his hands. It's like, okay, what are you doing here? But I think for him, the moment got a little bit big for him, and that usually doesn't happen on those Monday night games and those national broadcast games. He's usually really good in that performance area. So now I think it's just a matter of him getting that opportunity again and proving that it was a fluke. And I'm pretty sure that the Bills are like, okay, it's just week one, good defense. They've always given the Bills problems, maybe not to that level, but live to fight another day. And once the Jets come around later on in the year, that they should have a better shot at this thing.
Rookie offensive players, obviously Dalton Kincaid, Torrence. Is there a new depth to this offense this year, or is it the same? Like, how would you rate those guys just the first month of the season?
Yeah, I think the way that they've utilized Kincaid in terms of on the field, I think has been impressive because they haven't really done that with young players in their first season, and they needed to because they were searching for anything down the year last year. They brought Cole Beasley out of retirement to put him into the game in their 11 personnel formations. It was just bad news by the end of the year last year. But they've basically utilized Dalton Kincaid as their slot receiver this year. He's getting a ton of time. He's way out snapping all of the other third receiver options. And so I think that's a great thing. The one thing I'll take issue with is his average depth of target right now is 3.4 yards. And he's this really dynamic tight end. He's good in space and everything like that. And they're basically using him like a pylon that Cole Beasley was early on in his career. They're trying to get him on screens and stuff, but the Bills aren't a good screen team. That's just not who they are. So I would like to see them try and attack the intermediate a little bit more with him and get that average depth of target up, because I think he could be a dynamic option for them down the stretch. The other rookie, O'Cyrus Torrence, their second round pick, I think right now through 3 weeks, there's a case you can make that he has been their best offensive lineman. At right guard. And it's not Connor McGovern, their left guard, had a really good game against the Commanders, but he kind of struggled in week 1. Mitch Morse has been up and down so far this year. Spencer Brown, who knows? And Deion Dawkins has just been like kind of above average. O'Cyrus Torrence was just absolutely manhandling people in the Commanders game. And that's a good defensive line where he's shifting people over in the run game. And one-on-one, you trust him to go up against some of these studs of that defensive line. To me, I think right now, if as long as the first 3 weeks aren't, fool's gold here, I think they really are onto something with O'Cyrus Torrence as a locked-in starter for a while.
Just like you said, the Bills aren't a good screen team. I just want to say the Chicago Bears are also not a good screen team, and yet they call a screen every single play. So maybe Luke Getsy could learn something. All right, so let's get you out of here on this. Like AFC wise, how do you view this? Like the Chiefs, like they might. I mean, the Chiefs have a top 5 defense, dude. It might be over. Like even though the Dolphins are like the best team in football right now, if the Chiefs can get them in reasonable scoring distance, Mahomes can outscore them. It feels like, and again, we always, and you mentioned this earlier about the window, we always shut the door on teams a year early in the NFL because we did get bored with them. I remember, and I've said this before, but like when Lamar Jackson came on the scene in 2019, Greg Bishop at Sports Illustrated went to Kansas City to do like a Mahomes is still here piece, just because it's like the league had moved on so quickly. And then they won the Super Bowl that year. And it's just funny how quickly we move on. Like, whether it's Burrow's league, you signed the extension, Justin Herbert, whatever. It feels like people just don't even talk about the Bills anymore, which is incredible in relation to how amazing the story was 3 years ago. So break down what you think their place in the AFC is and what they think their place in the AFC is right now.
I think they believe that they have a shot to beat anybody. And like I said before, I think this is a better team than it was last year. And last year they were the betting Super Bowl favorites. And I think they kind of like the fact that still no one's really talking about them, even though they just blew out a couple of teams, albeit two not so great team. Well, I suppose the Commanders were 2-0 heading in, but I think that's kind of fake a little bit.
Kind of.
Yeah. And the Raiders, of course, are, whatever they want to be. So I think they think that they are right there with anybody in the AFC. And, there's been a couple of teams out there, like the Chargers a lot of people thought the Chargers might take the step, and the Bengals are struggling. The Dolphins are certainly the team right now that everyone's talking about, and for good reason. I mean, you throw 70 points on the board, that's going to get some people's attention. And I think even if the Bills lose this game against the Dolphins, I don't know that it necessarily dictates how I feel about their overall Super Bowl chances this year. Just because they have learned their lessons to where they have peaked in the regular season for the last few years here. And whether it be the defense not stepping up in 2021 or last year falling flat in the playoffs altogether, it just seemed like they were out of gas in a couple of different ways. So now I think they're kind of building towards that postseason, and we're seeing a lot more of vet rest days or for early on in practice weeks. And there's also this other guy that we haven't brought up once on this so far that's pretty much waiting to return. That's Von Miller, who is an absolute hellraiser. And if there's a guy who can come off a torn ACL and be a huge factor, it's Von Miller. He's just that talent. He's genetically gifted. It's just stupid watching him play at his age. So I think all of those factors kind of give them hope. In terms of where I think they sit in the AFC right now, it's below the Chiefs. There's no doubt. The Chiefs are just crazy good. I want to see the Dolphins go through the pace of an entire season before I'm ready to crown them. And other than that, I think you can make an argument that the Bills can battle with just about anybody and beat just about anybody. And heck, they've beaten the Chiefs in the regular season the last couple of years. So you can make that argument too. The one team I think might give them some trouble are the Ravens. I think they're a sneaky team, but yeah, I think the Bills are right in that top 2 to 4 area right now. And as long as you get in and you're healthy, who knows what can happen in the playoffs.
That's the thing. We close these windows for teams so early, and it's like, well, you might have to just win one game.
Their window is very much not closed. That I will say,
and it's not gonna close. No, there's a bit of a Joe Burrow said that the window for the Bengals is as long as he's here. Like that is true of Josh Allen too. Like that is. As long as there's a baseline of talent, Josh Allen can win you 3 playoff games and they get to the Super Bowl. All right, Joe, we'll let you get back to parenthood, to WNBA playoffs, to 30 for 30s on the ESPN Plus library. We love ESPN Plus. Thank you so much, man, and we're looking forward to seeing what the Bills do on Sunday.
I appreciate you, Kevin. Thanks, man.